Hey guys, today I have a very impressive video to share with you. It is by a gentleman named Richard Tarr. In his video he will show you proof from his own personal Bible that it has been changed. I will include in the description a link back to his YouTube channel.
Hi, this is Richard, and I wanted to talk about how when I'm looking at my Bible, I can see which verses, if any, have changed. And I'd like to show you, starting out in Luke chapter 11 in my Bible, verses 21 and 22. And here's how sometimes I will do a study. This particular one I did a long time ago, many years ago. I think it was in 1999. And when I wrote down verses 21 and 22, I wrote out each of the things that were talked about in that verse, like strong man, armed, palace, property, and so on. And what they meant to me, how I interpret them, like strong man was a teacher, armed was his teaching, and so on. And now if I go today and look at verses 21 and 22, I can see that all of those are there. Strong man's there, armed is there, all the way down to spoil. No changes. Everything's okay. So, from being, looking at this many years ago and writing down these clues, these little breadcrumbs, I'm able to figure out this verse at least hasn't changed. Okay, so let's try this again over in Luke chapter 5, verses 36 to 39. And this is the one about, it's the wineskin bottle conflict we have. And what I did, same thing, way back in around 1999 or so, I did the same thing. So in verses 36 to 39, I called it the Parable of Teachability, and I wrote down the garments were disciples, and the patch was the teaching method. And I wrote down wineskin is the disciples, the wine was the teaching method, old for familiar, new for unfamiliar. But when you go and look at verse 37 and 38 now, it doesn't say wineskin. Now it says bottles. Okay, let's try this again. Let's go over to Mark chapter 2 and verse 22. And again, we have the old bottle wineskin thing, problem. And when I studied this verse, this is between verses 21 and 22, I did the same thing. This time I put, old equaled whatever, new equaled whatever, cloth and wine equaled teaching. And then I wrote garment and wineskin equals talmudim. Talmudim is Hebrew for students. So I didn't write bottles. It was when I studied this way back when, that verse said wineskin. It did not say bottle. Okay, let's do this again. I'm going to go to Ezekiel chapter 28 and verse 13, and this is the chapter on the king of Tyre. And verse 13, it was listing all the stones that the king wore that he had. Now, when I did the study a long time ago, I put down on verse 13, I said there were only 9 stones, and that was missing the jasper, the agate, and the amethyst. And then I wrote down what those meant and a cross-reference. But today, when you go to look at verse 13, there's 10 stones, because somehow the jasper was included, it is included today, and it wasn't when I did this study. So this verse 13, has changed. Okay, here's another one. I'm going to turn to Genesis chapter 15 and verse 9. And verse 9 says, now it says, take me a heifer of 3 years old and a goat, and so on. Now, when I did the study on verse 9, I said bullock equals Babylon and Rome, the rams were Mede, Persia, the goat was Greece, and the birds were Israel. But now the verse says heifer, cow. Now, that's changed, because when I read that verse, it was bullock, and that's the Hebrew word eagle. But somehow a Hebrew letter he has been added to it to change it to the feminine gender, and that's why that verse says heifer. So somehow at some time after I did the study, this verse also changed. And that's how I do these. I'm looking through and seeing obvious things that notes or breadcrumbs, as I call them, that I left myself, that I can go back and I can see these changes. I'm not really, I don't really think it's a good practice to look at words that don't look familiar to you or whatever. I like something a little more that I can. It's assurance to me. I know for a fact that these verses that I showed you have changed.